Hey, what is up? It's me. I'm back coming at you with another chess recap. It's been a while since I made a video, but yeah, so basically I've covered like maybe 2 or 3 games from the Pogchamps 2 G.O.D edition chess tournament. This is so we've moved into the playoff stage, which is a double elimination. And this was the first game, well, the first match in this tournament. So it's in between Brayden and Nathan. So there were 3 games. I'm going to spoil it. I mean, it's going to be in the title anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But so Brayden comes out on top. Nathan wins the first game, and then Brayden wins the second and third game. The second game was probably the closest and also like the best that they played. So yeah, Brayden had 94 accuracy, Nathan with 68, still not bad. So it was a good game, and let's just get right into it. So Brayden begins with e4. Nathan responds with e5, just, classic chess. Knight f3, and knight c6. So, this is all just normal, everyday stuff. We get bishop c4, which the Italian game, this is what I play against. This setup. I love the Italian game. It's great. It's very aggressive. It's great. Bishop c5. Here I used to play the Evans Gambit, which is b4, and that's what my brother played. Now I play something a little different, but it's very good. Bishop d4. This move's a little weird because it allows c3, which is what Brayden played, and it just basically gains a tempo on the bishop. Bishop goes back, and we get d3. So I don't like this move very much just because it's not really in theme with the Evans Gambit. Like, the Evans Gambit is really aggressive. You want to get a strong center very early and develop all your pieces. The computer is suggesting d4. D4 is one of the main moves that you're going to be playing in the Evans Gambit. Like, an Evans Gambit without d4 is not really correct. Like, you're almost always playing d4 in the Evans Gambit. But anyway, we get knight f6, best move, and we get knight g5, which is being, aggressive. a4, computer says, is good too, but, knight g5, it's creating this threat on f7, if my arrows would draw correctly. But, yeah. So now we get d5, which, I don't know, that's a little weird of a move. Like, I would have just castled because, then the rook is defending the pawn, and yeah. But we get d5. So Brayden takes. Nathan goes back here with the knight, which is the best move. Brayden pushes the pawn, and Nathan brings the knight to that square, blocking the bishop so it cannot see the f7 square anymore. Brayden takes. Nathan takes back with the bishop, and we get queen f3, which is a pretty decent mistake. Nathan does not end up taking advantage of it, but basically he could have played bishop g4, and then the only move that the queen has is to go to g3, and it really has literally nowhere else it can go. Like, it's pretty much stuck there, and it might have chances to even get trapped later on. So, yeah. However, Nathan does not find that move and goes for bishop e6, which is a blunder because, first of all, it doesn't capitalize on what, could have been, but also allows the pawns to be doubled after knight takes. The pawn takes back. Now he's got doubled pawns. And Brayden plays bishop g5. Bishop b5 was best because after the check here, the king actually has to move because, the knight coming here, that's just not going to work out because, you're going to get all sorts of, queen checks or whatever. It's just not good. Yep, so that's why that had happened. But did not get played. Knight g5. I mean, wow. I'm so good, dude. Bishop g5. Also notice Brayden has burnt quite a bit of time compared to Nathan. So, yeah. But bishop g5. h6, which it's a mistake because, it allows just taking. And, if knight takes back, then it basically allows you to win a pawn. Or, like, get a significant advantage in some other way. However, this is not taken advantage of, which is why there's a missed win. Bishop h4, he should have taken the knight. But, happens. G5 here. This really, I don't really like this move because, like, it really just exposes the king side, and the queen side's already pretty weak, so, the pawn structure here is not really great. But anyway, we get... What's going on here? Alright, Brayden brings the bishop back, g3. And Nathan moves rook to b8. I'm not really sure what this move was about, but, whatever. d4. This is a mistake. Again, there was a lot of mistakes in this game that were just failed to take advantage of. e5 here would have been a lot better than what Nathan ended up playing because it's just grabbing space in the center and on your opponent's side of the board. You always want to grab space on your opponent's side of the board if you can later take advantage of it or something. Like, you don't want to lose the pawn or something, but if you can, you should probably do it. But he takes the pawn rather than pushing. And Brayden makes a mistake again and takes the bishop. And then Nathan makes a mistake by not taking with the queen and taking with the knight. I'm not going to go into why all of that was a mistake, but it wasn't, it's not ideal. I'm pretty sure you didn't want to move the knight back because it's controlling some pretty vital squares in your opponent's territory, and that's the reason why you didn't want to do that. The reason why you didn't want to do the bishop is because, well, frankly, you don't want to activate your opponent's queen when they take here, and you would almost rather that they take, because even though it does double your pawns, it opens up your rook, so... And, like, you could just be taking this pawn or something. Or castling, which is actually what the computer recommends. Like, just castle, and you'll be alright. But, get that, and now castles, which is the best move. Nathan takes the pawn, Brayden recaptures, and we get queen d4, which attacks this bishop, which is hanging at the moment. And, yeah. So Brayden plays queen d3, which the computer says is a blunder. It does blunder away your advantage, but it doesn't, like, end the game necessarily. It does allow the queen trade, which might not be exactly what you want. Usually in the Evans Gambit, you're definitely not trying to trade queens, but, whatever. The computer wanted rook d1, which is like a little advanced, I guess, but not really, because after the queen takes, it's just removing the defender of this knight, so then your queen can just grab it, and, you'll be in a good position, because you'll have a tempo on the rook. But anyway, the queens do come off the board, and we get a position that looks like... All right, so Nathan brings his rook to the center of the board. Good move. And my Brayden brings his rook behind the bishop to protect it. Just logical moves. Yeah, the game gets a lot less messy around here. Like, we're closer to the end game. It's just a little, like, nicer to look at. Less mistakes are happening. Anyway, the knights get traded, which are the best moves. And Brayden brings both of it. So now both of his rooks are in the center. which is pretty much always good. Nathan brings his king closer to the center. Good move. And Brayden brings his bishop to e4, which is attacking this knight. This knight also pinned to this pawn. This knight could take this pawn as well if it wants, because it is just a hanging pawn. So, and he does take that pawn. And we get a3, which is inaccurate. I would even call it a mistake, because now you are down a pawn, whereas you could have played rook b1, skewering the knight and grabbing this pawn. Either way, you get a3, knight goes back, and now we get rook to b1. We get rook d7, protecting the pawn, and rook e d1. So this is just going for a trade of the rooks, which, you know, just simplification. Even though you are down a pawn, sometimes it can be easier to play with less material on the board. So Nathan just doubles the rooks, which, you know, reinforces this rook. So when it gets traded, he can recapture with the rook, I would assume. Yep. So he recaptures with the rook, and we get a4, which is, again, not really a good move. One thing I definitely notice is I'm like pretty sure. Yeah, this is really just not. Notice how also pretty low on time now, 3 minutes and 10 seconds against 6 minutes and 38. So, you know, and when this might have been like just time trouble and he started pushing the pawn, but, you know, like I think this pawn could just get blocked at some point by something, or like maybe the knight, or I don't know. But yeah, it's not looking too great here. All right, we get knight d4. Oh yeah, see, the computer wanted knight a5. We get knight d4, which is considered a miss-win because it does actually allow this pawn to be taken by either one of these pieces. So Brayden does take it with the rook. We get knight e2 check. Maybe Nathan was hoping like the king would go back here, but it wouldn't have mattered anyway because the rook is actually pinned to the king. But you know. Anyway, we get king f1. Rook takes, bishop takes back, and what happened? Right here, like I already knew that this was looking like a drawn game, but you know, we've got like, you know, these aren't like high level players. They're not gonna draw this every time. Like this definitely isn't something where you would expect them to draw. Like, yeah, it is pretty much drawn, but I don't like. I almost like watching this live. I thought this was guaranteed to be like a mistake somewhere in here, which there ended up being a mistake that they made. Brayden plays a5, which I think he just wanted to like block this pawn off. So we get e5 by Nathan, a6 by Brayden. Not bad, but you know, I would have played what the computer said, b3, just kick the knight out. And we get e4. I don't know what Nathan was really. I mean, I guess he just missed that this bishop could take this pawn. But yeah, the bishop can take that pawn. So that pawn gets taken. We get king e6, just moving the king closer to the center of the board. And we get g3 finally. Oh, did I call that b3 before again? You know, I got to get better at that. Anyway, g3. We get g3 finally. And knight h3, which, like, I saw this move and I was like, no, because I knew that it was pretty much over from here because it blatantly trapped the knight. Like, the knight is trapped, like, permanently. We get king g2. You know, the knight's trapped. So we get king e5, which I think is all right. You know, Nathan found a sequence that I think is probably the closest to what might have given him a chance to get the knight out of there. So, yeah. What? All right. So Brayden moved the bishop back, which to the computer's calling a mistake. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because the knight's still trapped. But what I wanted him to do is just take the knight, and then after the king takes the bishop, then your king, the white king, is just gonna eat up these pawns, and it's gonna be over. But Brayden preferred to just bring the bishop back, and the knight's trapped still. So anyway, now we get g4, which frees up this square for the knight and also protects the knight for the moment. So we get f3 by Brayden. It's the best move. And the knight tries to escape, goes knight g5. And here Brayden does find the right move, which is this obvious pawn fork right here. And he gets the knight. Right. So there's still a little bit of work to be done here, but this side is completely frozen. Nothing's going to move here. He's got a bishop at his disposal to help with the pawn pushing, and it's pretty much over. So he plays h4, check. Nathan plays en passant. G takes h3, check. And Brayden takes it back. Nathan plays h5. Brayden patiently, kind of, I guess. Because, you know, not like just like pushing his pawn or something ridiculous like that. Plays bishop back to f3, which attacks this pawn. King has to move back. And now this pawn is going to be won because got two attackers, there's only one defender, obviously. So wins the pawn. And it was fairly, you know, just normal from here. He just gets the bishop back over here to make sure nothing can happen with this side, and somehow this pawn gets taken, and then this one goes down and promotes. So now we get this. Brayden pushes his pawn. King g6. Brayden pushes his pawn again. King g7. King h5. King h8. King h6. The kings are now opposed, and the opposition is in white's favor. So that is always what you want. King g8 is forced. g6. Get king h8 again. g7, check. And now I think this is a pretty cool looking checkmate. We get bishop d5, checkmate. And that was the end of the game. So that was the second game. The third game and the first game were all pretty messy. The third game ended with like Nathan missing a maiden one, but yeah, that was that. And yeah, so I can show you the tournament. Actually, no, the tournament bracket isn't really updated right now, but basically, so it's double elimination. So Nathan is now in the losers bracket, and he will play Wallace because Wallace was eliminated by Rubio. I am going to play Brayden, and then whoever wins that will play Rubio in the, yeah, that. Anyway, this was cool-ish, whatever. If you liked video or whatever, like the recap, subscribe or whatever. I don't really care. I'll probably be making a lot more of these because we're in the playoffs now. So, yeah, and bye. Adios. Hasta luego. However else you say bye.